He wanted to sell our 13th century land grant to Texas. Instead, I used the 2,000-year-old Ogham Covenant and turned his corporate raid into legal oblivion. The rain in the Scottish Highlands does not fall. It drifts, a pervasive horizontal mist that settles into the wool of your jumper and the marrow of your bones. I am Elara, and this drifting rain is my oldest companion. It has shaped the granite of my home for millennia, and in turn, that granite has shaped me. My perception is not like that of others. When my fingertips brush against the cold, wet surface of the standing stone known as the Weeping Sister, I do not feel just rough texture. I feel the memory of the glacier that scraped over it, the slow, patient pressure of ice a mile thick. I feel the faint psychic echo of the hands that raised it, hands that belonged to people who understood the earth as a living, breathing entity. My title is Head Curator and Headstone Conservator for the Glenmorraghen Estate, but that is a modern label for an ancient role. I am the niche glided, the keeper. The estate is not merely 50,000 acres of moor, mountain, and loch. It is a palimpsest of history, each layer sacred. My primary charge is the collection within the underground museum, a vault carved directly into the bedrock beneath the manor house. It is a place of constant, gentle humidity and a profound, echoing silence, broken only by the whisper of my brushes and the soft hum of the climate control system. Here, time is suspended. I preserve a torque from the Bronze Age, its gold wire so fine and delicate it seems spun by a mythical beast. I decipher the fading ink in a book of hours that belonged to a queen who sought refuge here from political storms. I piece together the shattered seal of a knight who pledged his life to this land and never returned. These are not artifacts to me. They are charges. Each possesses a resonance, a silent song of its own making, and my duty is to listen and to protect. The Laird, Charles McAllister, is the 9th of his line to hold the title. He is 94, a man whose body is failing, but whose eyes still hold the sharp, flinty light of the Highlands. He understands my work because he shares my blood, albeit distantly. The sensitivity, the connection to the Firen, the deep truth of the land runs in our veins. He calls me not by my title, but as his Ban Gaiskich, his heroine, for guarding what he loves most. The violation of this sanctuary began not with a shout, but with the crunch of gravel under a tire too new and too expensive for our rough driveway. A low-slung black sports car, a creature of tarmac and arrogance, had no place here. From it emerged Alistair Croft. He was the new estate manager, hired by the Laird's solicitors in Edinburgh to modernize operations and maximize revenue streams. He was a sculpture of modern ambition, sharp-suited, with a smile that was a transaction in itself. His handshake was dry and brief, his eyes scanning the great hall of the manor not with wonder, but with a cold appraisal, mentally calculating the cost of the oak paneling and the potential ROI of turning it into a destination wedding venue. Our first interaction was a study in dissonance. I was in the library, examining a 13th century charter under a soft light. He entered without knocking, the scent of his cologne. Aventus. I later learned, a brutal, synthetic assault of pineapple and birch, preceding him like a chemical weapon. "Miss Elara," he began, his voice a polished English baritone that seemed to coat the ancient quiet air in a layer of oil. "I've been reviewing the estate budgets. The allocation for your department is quite staggering for what is essentially a private hobby. I did not look up from the vellum. It is not a hobby. It is preservation. Preservation of assets that generate no income," he countered, moving to stand beside me, too close. He gestured to the charter. "This, for instance, I have a contact at Sotheby's. A single document like this could fund the reslating of the West Wing roof." "The roof is my concern as well," I said softly, my focus on a faded annotation in the margin. "And this document is not for sale. It is part of the estate's soul." He gave a short, dismissive laugh. "Souls don't pay the tax, man, my dear. I've convinced the Laird we need a full asset inventory. Everything must be assessed for its liquidity potential." The days that followed were a slow, creeping poison. Croft's presence was a stain on the fabric of Glenmorraghen. He would walk the halls with his phone, speaking loudly about leveraging heritage brands and monetizing nostalgia. He ordered the ancient, wild gardens to be tidied, his landscapers ripping out native heather to plant sterile, ornamental shrubs. The worst was his attitude towards the staff, the families who had worked the land for generations. He referred to them as legacy liabilities and suggested automating their roles. The laird, weary and confused by the barrage of financial jargon and dire projections Croft presented him, began to retreat. I would find him in the museum, sitting silently amongst the stones and artifacts, his gnarled hand resting on the weeping sister's smaller cousin, which we kept in the vault for study. Croft says the world has changed. Elara, he murmured one afternoon, his voice thin. He says we must change with it or become a museum piece ourselves. The world has always changed, Laird, I replied, running a hand over the cool granite. The stones have endured. They teach us that the deepest strength is in remaining true to one's nature. But the pressure was relentless. Croft began hosting prospective partners at the manor. I would glimpse them through windows, men in technical fabric jackets, pointing at the mountains, discussing zipline courses and natural adventure parks. The air grew thick with their conversations about market penetration and visitor throughput. The very silence of the land seemed to be shrinking, compressed by the noise of commerce. The foundation of injustice was this daily, grinding erosion. It was the sight of Croft leaning against the three sisters, using the ancient altar stone as a prop for a photograph to send to a potential investor. It was the sound of his laughter echoing in the medieval chapel during a conference call. It was the profound, gut-wrenching knowledge that he saw the priceless, timeless heart of Glenmorraghen as a collection of line items on a balance sheet, and me, its guardian, as the most obsolete line of all. The Laird's 95th birthday was meant to be a quiet affair, a gathering of the true family of Glenmorraghen, the old gamekeeper, the shepherd whose family had tended the flock since the clearances, the village historian, and a few others whose roots were deep in this soil. We met in the great hall, a fire roaring in the cavernous hearth, battling the perpetual damp of the Highland evening. I had prepared a gift for the Laird, a complete translation and preservation of the Robert the Bruce land grant. I had spent months painstakingly consolidating the flaking ink, using techniques passed down from my grandmother. It was more than a document. It was a reaffirmation of the bond between the crown and this land, a recognition of its strategic and spiritual significance. The Laird's eyes welled with tears as I presented it to him in a new, sealed case. "You have given me back a piece of my own history, a grad," he said, his voice thick with emotion. For a moment, the shadow of Croft receded, and then the door opened and the shadow returned, longer and darker than before. Croft entered, and with him was a man who seemed like his amplified reflection. Louder, broader, clad in a garish tartan waistcoat that was a mockery of the real thing. This was Vance Harrington, a Texas-based oil and gas heir who had turned his fortune to collecting history. "Charles," Vance boomed, his voice scattering the quiet, hallowed atmosphere like a gunshot. "Happy birthday! Alistair told me you were a man of taste, and by God he wasn't lying." He strode across the room, his boots thudding on the flagstones, and clapped the frail Laird on the back with a force that made him wince. Croft smiled his thin smile. "Vance is a great admirer of Scottish heritage, Charles." He was keen to pay his respects. Vance's eyes, however, were not on the Laird. They were roving the room, inventorying everything. They locked onto the land grant in its case. "Well, I'll be. Is that what I think it is?" Before I could intervene, he reached out and tapped the glass of the case with a thick, ring-laden finger. "The Bruce himself! My God, the provenance!" He turned to the Laird, his demeanor shifting to a parody of seriousness. "Sir, a piece like this, it's a crime to keep it hidden away. It belongs to the world. In my museum in Houston, we could have it in a state-of-the-art, argon-filled case. Climate-controlled, secure, loved by millions." Croft placed a familiar, possessive hand on the Laird's shoulder. Charles listened to him. Vance is prepared to be exceptionally generous. For this, and a selection of other pieces he's identified. It would secure the estate's future for the next century. "No more hard choices?" The Laird looked from Croft's eager face to Vance's avaricious one. The comfort he'd felt moments before evaporated, replaced by a trapped, anxious confusion. "The grant, it has always been here," he whispered. "Here," he whispered. "And it will be honored and displayed with the reverence it deserves," Croft insisted, his voice a silken trap. "Not hidden in a basement, tended to by a—" His gaze flicked to me, standing protectively near the Laird. "A solitary woman who treats rocks like pets." The words were delivered with a venomous courtesy. Vance chuckled, a low, grating sound. "Hell, I'll take the rocks too! Those big ones out in the field. The three sisters, They'd look incredible by my pool in Dallas. A real conversation starter? The air in the room turned to ice. The gamekeeper, a man of few words named Hamish, took a step forward, his fists clenching. The shepherd looked at the floor, his face a mask of shame and anger. They were talking about the heart of the estate, the soul of the glen. To hear them spoken of as landscaping features was a profound cultural desecration. Croft saw the stunned horror on my face and misinterpreted it as simple feminine sentimentality. See, Charles, even Elara understands the emotional weight. But we must be practical. It's time to let go of the past. It's just paper and stone. Just paper and stone. The 5 words hung in the air, a blasphemy. They were not just an insult to me or to the laird. They were an insult to the memory of every McAllister who had fought and died for this land, to every crofter who had drawn life from its soil, to the very glaciers that had shaped it. In that moment, the last vestige of doubt vanished. This was not a difference of opinion. It was a war for the soul of Glenmorraghen. I did not speak. I did not need to. A deep, tectonic calm settled over me, the same stillness I felt when communing with the oldest stones. The keeper was gone. The defender awoke. I looked at the laird, and I saw the conflict in his eyes, his love for his heritage warring with the fear of financial ruin that Croft had so expertly cultivated. I gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to the laird, a silent promise that transcended words. Then, I turned and walked out of the great hall, leaving the sound of Vance's negotiating and Croft's placating lies behind me. The whispers of the stones beneath my feet were no longer a lament. They were a call to arms. My strategic awakening did not begin in an office or a library, but on my knees on the wet, peaty earth before the 3 sisters. The mist had thickened into a steady, soft rain, soaking through my waxed jacket and trickling down my neck. It was a cleansing rain. I placed my bare palms flat on the largest stone, the one who remembers. I closed my eyes and let my consciousness sink beneath the surface. I was not seeking a legal deed or a hidden clause in a modern contract. I was seeking a much older truth, a covenant written not on parchment, but in the very memory of the land. The stones sang to me, a low, complex threnody of ages. They remembered the clan chiefs who had been crowned here, their feet bare on the grass, their hands upon the stone. They remembered the lines of sovereignty drawn not in ink, but in blood and oath and shared belonging. And they remembered the Geas na Firin, the sacred bond of truth. The land grant from Robert the Bruce was not merely a royal favor, it was a later written confirmation of a primal, pre-existing bond between the McAllister line and this specific patch of earth. The Bruce had recognized what the stones already knew, that the McAllisters were the Dawain Weil, the noble kindred, chosen not by man but by the land itself. This bond carried conditions of stewardship. The land was not owned, it was held in trust. The laird was not a proprietor, but a guardian. Failure in this duty could, according to the oldest laws, break the bond. Croft, with his spreadsheets and modern contracts, lived in a world of ink on paper. I operated in a realm of memory etched in granite and whispered in the wind. My alliance was not with lawyers, but with the land itself, and with the few who still understood its language. Back in the museum vault, the heart of my sanctuary, I did not open a law book. I went to the oldest part of the collection, a sealed casket of oiled birch bark. Inside, protected from the centuries by herbs and a vacuum of silence, were scrolls older than the Bruce parchment. They were not written in Latin or courtly Gaelic, but in Ogham, the cryptic, vertical script of the ancient Celts, a language of notches and lines that my grandmother had taught me to read, a language that speaks of trees and stones and the boundaries between worlds. These scrolls told of the Dileab, the ritual of legacy. It was a ceremony not performed in over 200 years. A rite of renewal that required 3 things: the rightful laird, the Neach Glaidhid, the keeper, and the Clashon Cride, the heartstones. Its purpose was to reaffirm the Geas, to make the bond between family and land visible and tangible once more. A successful Dileab would, by the oldest laws of the land, laws that predated and, in certain esoteric but legally recognized circles of Scottish customary law, were argued to underpin all subsequent property law, re-establish the McAllister title in its most fundamental form. It would make the estate, for all intents and purposes, inalienable. It could not be sold, for it was not a commodity. It could only be bestowed upon a worthy successor. The preparation was a solitary, week-long vigil. I gathered the specific lichens mentioned in the scrolls from the north face of Glenmorraghen. I collected water from the Tobar Nabiatha, the Well of Life, a spring that emerged from a crack in the bedrock beneath the chapel, water that had never seen the sun. I prepared the laird, spending hours with him, speaking the old words, showing him the Ogham script. His fading mind, which struggled with the names of his modern medicines, seemed to sharpen and clarify at the mention of the Geas. It was as if I was waking him from a long sleep. While Croft was in his office, with its new computer and satellite internet, negotiating the price of my soul with Vance Harrington, I was in the mist with the stones, preparing to remind the world of a power it had forgotten. I was not planning a lawsuit. I was preparing a resurrection. The instrument of Croft's reckoning arrived in the form of a dour man from Edinburgh, a bank assessor named Mr. Dalglish. Croft had finally pressured the laird into authorizing a full valuation of the estate's movable assets, the entire contents of my museum. This was the final step before the auction. The vault, my sanctuary, was violated by their presence. Croft and Vance stood together, a pair of vultures. Vance's eyes gleamed with naked greed as he mentally catalogued his future possessions. The laird was there in his wheelchair, pushed by a nervous aide, looking small and lost amidst the treasures he had loved his whole life. Mr. Dalglish, a man of ledgers and numbers, opened his tablet, ready to reduce centuries to currency. "This is the crown jewel," Vance said, his voice reverent for all the wrong reasons as he pointed to the Bruce parchment. "And that torque, magnificent, and will definitely be crating up these standing stones. I've already got a structural engineer and a helicopter transport company on standby." He said it with the casualness of someone ordering a pizza. "It will be done," Croft said, a triumphant final gleam in his eye. He held a sheaf of papers, the sales agreement. He leaned over the laird. "Just your signature here, Charles. On this line, it's for the best, for the future of Glenmorraghen." The laird's hand trembled violently. He looked at the pen as if it were a venomous snake. Mr. Dalglish cleared his throat, his finger poised over his tablet. I stepped forward from the shadows where I had been observing. I was not carrying a phone or a legal document. In my hands, I held a small, moss-covered stone I had pried from the sacred socket at the base of the Three Sisters, a clach crida. In my other hand was a small, ancient vial of hollowed rock containing water from the Tobar Nabiatha. "The assessment is premature," I said, my voice not loud, but it resonated in the stone vault with a strange carrying quality, as if the walls themselves were amplifying it. Croft sighed with theatrical exasperation. "Elara, for God's sake, this is no time for your pagan theatrics. This is business, real business." "This land's business is older than business," I replied, my gaze steady. I turned to the laird, ignoring the others completely. "Laird McAllister, a Thig Herna. Do you remember the Deliab, the oath of your bloodline to the stone, the Geas Nafirin?" A remarkable transformation began to occur. The confusion in the old man's eyes burned away, replaced by a clear, sharp light. The trembling in his hands stilled. He looked from me to the heartstone in my hand, and he nodded. A slow, deliberate, and powerful motion. "I remember," he said, his voice firmer than it had been in years. "What is this nonsense?" Vance snapped, his patience evaporating. "Charlie, sign the damn papers!" "Silence," the laird commanded, and the word held an unexpected authority. He looked at Croft. "You will be silent." Ignoring their sputtering, I began. I spoke the words from the birch bark scrolls, the ancient Gaelic phrases, guttural and powerful, rolling through the vault. I placed the heartstone in the laird's outstretched hands. His fingers, gnarled with arthritis, closed around it with a surprising strength. I uncorked the vial and sprinkled the clear, cold water over his hands and the stone, anointing them. Over his hands and the stone, anointing them. "By the stone that remembers, by the water that gives life, by the blood of the Doween whale, we reaffirm the bond," I intoned. "The land and the laird are one. The keeper is the witness. Let the Firin be known. Nothing happened that a camera could have recorded. No mystical light show. No thunder." Vance burst out laughing, a harsh, relieved sound. "Christ on a cracker. I thought she was serious for a minute. Pagan hocus pocus. Come on, Charlie, enough of this. Sign the papers." But the laird was changing. He pushed himself up straighter in his wheelchair. His pale cheeks gained a faint flush of color. He looked at Croft, and his gaze was no longer that of a confused old man, but of a laird who could trace his line back to the mists of time, a man who held the authority of centuries in his eyes. "The land does not consent," the laird said, his voice ringing with a finality that brooked no argument. "What?" Croft sputtered, his face flushing with anger and disbelief. "You heard him," I said, my voice calm amidst the gathering storm. "The Fiann Clach has been invoked. The covenant is reaffirmed. You cannot sell what is not entirely yours to sell. You are merely a steward, Croft, a failed one. The land rejects you." It was then that the earth spoke. It was not a dramatic earthquake. It was a deep, resonant hum, a subsonic vibration that traveled up through the soles of our feet and into our bones. It was the sound of a great, sleeping beast shifting in its slumber. The floor of the vault trembled. A fine dust of mortar sifted down from the ceiling between the stones. On Mr. Dalglish's table, his glass of water trembled, the surface rippling in concentric circles. Vance's face went from red to a sickly pale. "What in the hell was that?" he whispered, his bravado utterly vanished. "The land," I said simply, meeting his terrified gaze. "It has a voice, and it has spoken." The real collapse was legal and financial. The invocation of the ancient covenant, meticulously documented and later presented by a specialist in Celtic and Scottish customary law I had quietly retained from the University of the Highlands and Islands, created an immediate and impenetrable legal morass. The proposed sale was frozen by an emergency injunction. The estate's very status was thrown into question, its inalienable nature now a matter of legal record. Croft's financiers, spooked by the unforeseen title complications, pulled out immediately. Vance Harrington, furious and calling us all crazy Scots, left on the next flight to London empty-handed. The final personal humiliation for Croft was both mundane and poetic. As he stood there fuming and defeated, his plans in ruins, a pipe, a lead water pipe laid down in the 18th century that he had repeatedly refused to budget for replacing, citing it as a low-priority, non-income generating repair, chose that moment to burst in the ceiling directly above him. It wasn't a dramatic explosion, just a sudden groaning split. Icy, peat-brown water, centuries old, cascaded down in a torrent, drenching his expensive Savile Row suit, flooding his church's custom-made boots, and plastering his perfectly styled hair to his scalp. He stood there, soaked and shivering, a modern man utterly defeated by the very antiquity and neglect he had sought to exploit. The catharsis was not in his soaking, but in the profound, re-established silence that descended